everyone. This week seemed a lot more normal at school. No snow days, no early releases, no 2-hour delays. The past weeks have seemed so crazy I thought we would never get back on track. However, after this week, my classes have finally seemed to get back to the norm. In both my government sections, we started and finished new subunits this week. In first block, our overarching unit is civil liberties with a strong focus on the First Amendment. This week we just focused on student rights because this relates so much more to high school students. My second and third block's overarching unit is the executive branch, and this week we learned about bureaucracy, or the fourth branch. The module I chose to focus on this week is classroom management. This is one thing that I have never been tremendously confident in, but as my student teaching goes on, I realized I do have control over the classroom, and I do engaging activities like in a positive atmosphere that my CT and I have created for the students. In first block, we started the week learning about specific court cases. I went through 3 students' rights cases with them so that they could understand the students' desire to have their First Amendment freedoms, while the administration needs to create a safe climate without disruption for the students. We looked at 3 cases. The first one was Tinker versus Des Moines, which is the one where students wanted to wear black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. We looked at Westside Community Schools versus Mergens, which was where students wanted to create an after-school Bible club. And the last one we looked at was Melton versus Young, in which students wore Confederate flag jackets to school. Since this school that I'm teaching at has had issues regarding the Confederate flag at school the past couple of years, this case was even more applicable to them. At first, I was nervous about bringing up this controversial topic in the classroom since it was so close to home to these students, but I wanted to show students how these student right cases matter to them because something like this happened in their own school. So they can see these court cases and they're not just super far away from them. These things actually happen in their own school. So I showed students their own school dress code that discusses offensive images and racially insensitive images and words. And since these students are DE seniors, I figured they would be able to handle this conversation, and they did a great job discussing it and relating it back to the court cases that we had already discussed. So after we went through these cases together as a class, I told students to get into partners, and then they would have to select one of the pre-selected students' rights cases. So before class, I selected 8 different students' rights cases that were applicable to students and covered all parts of the First Amendment, like speech, religion, press, etc. The class has 32 students, and if they worked in groups of 2, that would be 16 different teams. And since I selected 8 cases, each case would have 2 teams associated with it. So one team would be the pro side of the argument, which was arguing for free speech, and one side would be the con side of the argument, which was arguing that the students are disturbing the classroom and that the administration can't have all this disruption. So each team had to write a newspaper editorial recounting their case and describing their position to the class. And they had to describe their position of the case within the newspaper article and talk about like what happened and why their opinion is correct. After the students were finished, I created 8 stations around the classroom with each case. So each station had the original paragraph summary of the case, and underneath that hung both the pro side of the argument and the con side of the argument that the students had written and I had printed out to put in the class. So in class one day we had a gallery walk in which students chose 2 different cases, not one that they had already written about, and they summarized the case and chose a side and wrote about why they thought that side was correct. After they did this, we had a discussion on students' rights to wrap up the unit. So through this activity, students could be exposed to so many different students' rights cases and the different arguments to both sides. So my second and third block classes have been talking about the bureaucracy this week, and since bureaucracy is technically part of their executive branch unit, we are finishing off the executive branch this week with this topic, and then next week we'll be starting on the legislative branch. Students have been learning about the 4 different categories of bureaucracy, what each category does, and examples that go into that category. Students learned about the category in groups, and then we did a jigsaw in which students broke up into different groups and had to teach their classmates about the category they already had learned about. They also had to make posters of these categories to help them remember what they are, and now they're taped around the classroom. Then each student was given a government agency on a slip of paper, and they had to figure out what the agency does and what category it goes to, and then tape it up on the poster that it relates to. We continued learning about how the bureaucracy affects students' lives specifically, like we talked about the Postal Service and how that relates to them. We talked about if they wanted to go on an airplane, that would be regulated by the FAA. We talked about how if they're paying taxes, that would be regulated by the IRS. If they have their driver's license, which most of them do, that's regulated by the DMV. They have teachers, which are part of the state bureaucracy, so we talked about how bureaucracy affects all students' lives each day. And then I did an activity that related this back to students through pizza, and they were really disappointed that they couldn't actually eat pizza, but basically they learned about how the USDA, FDA, and EPA regulates each aspect of a pizza, like the crust, the tomatoes, the cheese, pepperoni, the box, the delivery car, etc. So like the USDA regulates like how acidic tomatoes have to be, and they regulate like the meat that goes into pepperonis. So they had to figure out how each of these different agencies regulated what goes into pizza. So they didn't really like this activity that much because they had to investigate how each agency regulated every different food, and a lot of students said that their brains didn't work that way. But that is one reason why I liked this activity, because it forced them to kind of think outside the box and think in a way they're not used to. It also showed them how bureaucracy is really related to their everyday lives. And I want students to not only know what these agencies do, but how they relate back to their lives. So we finished off the week discussing iron triangles. And so iron triangles are how bureaucracy, congressional committees, and interest groups all work together, so how each of those three work together in a triangle. And then we also talked about issue networks, which are how those three groups plus media, universities, advocates, companies, etc. work together to promote different policy and different regulation. We have been speaking about the bureaucracies all week. We learned about interest groups during the elections unit, and we will talk about congressional committees next week. So the Iron Triangle is a good way for students to combine all of these different terms together and kind of see how they work together to push for different policies. So students had to find their own issues like healthcare or gun rights or environmental issues, and they had to research what specific groups were working together, and they had to create their own iron triangle and own issue network on like posters and such. So it has been a really good week. I really like teaching about students' rights and the bureaucracy, and I'm excited for next week. But to talk about our module we had this week, I chose Classroom Management, and Classroom Management has been something that's always been kind of troublesome to me. Like, I never know if I was actually like managing the class. I never know if I'm doing a good job with it, but the students have never like rioted or taken full advantage of me as a student teacher, so I guess I'm doing like okay enough. My main strategy is to be really positive in the classroom and create many engaging activities so they don't have time to misbehave. I've only had a few problems this semester with classroom management. I have advanced seniors who will be done with high school in a month, so they know they're so close to the end that they don't really want to jeopardize graduating, and they'll just do their work like and get it done. They like to turn around and talk to their friends while I'm giving directions or doing notes, so sometimes I say their name and have them turn around. But then this will make their classmates be like, yeah, like whoever, like turn around. And so sometimes that's a distraction. So sometimes I'll just wait, and then their classmates will kind of redirect them because then they know that I'm waiting for them. They're also on their phones a lot, which really doesn't bother me as much. I do a lot of activities where they need to be looking at different websites or using their phones. They all do have tablets given to them by the county, but since they are seniors, their tablets are all really old, and they're like the first generation ones, so they don't really work that well. So with this being said, the students do not bring their tablets to school because they're too heavy. We don't want to bring them. I'm like, okay. So they just have to use their phones for all these like activities. So since they have their phones out a lot doing stuff, they are also texting and doing whatever they want like while they work. So this doesn't really bother my CT, and she always said that if they're getting their work done, then it doesn't really matter that much if they're also like texting here and there. So I agree with her on that. So I don't really like talk to them about their phones unless they become like a real distraction, and then I have to redirect like, why do we have texting up? Why do we have Snapchat up? Why isn't like this, bureaucracy website up? So I don't really talk to them about it unless it's like really an issue. So I do have one student in my third block class who is constantly trying to get under my skin. He does the same thing to my CT, so I knew he would do it to me too. Like whenever I give directions, he always asks a ton of questions that he already knows the answers to. He interrupts me during notes to ask weird questions and and he likes to make like really politically charged statements like during class to make the rest of the class uncomfortable. But he is a really involved student. Like he is in SGA, which my CT is in charge of, and he's in MAC. So I see him a lot outside of our regular class because I see him during like club meetings and stuff. And I see him also do this to like all the other teachers. But he has said to me that he's just trying to like mess with me and he owns up to it. So like I know what he's doing and I know he knows what he's doing. So when he asks these like crazy questions, I typically don't answer him. And then if I don't, he kind of stops. So I just kind of ignore it, which seems to work really well. Sometimes he does ask real questions, which I do answer because I know like other students are also thinking the same thing. And then sometimes when he says really offensive comments, I have to talk to him about how that like will hurt other people's feelings in the class. And I've been working on it with him about having like a filter before he says stuff. So it's just kind of working. So throughout the months, he's realized that he cannot take like as much advantage of me as a student teacher as he originally thought, but basically treats me the same way as my CT. So when reading the article, The Keys to Classroom Management by Robert J. Marzano and Jana S. Marzano, I saw a lot of examples I already use in the classroom and other ones that could be exceedingly useful in the future. Some of their examples that I use are like moving closer to the student who is misbehaving. I tell them the learning objectives at the beginning of the lesson so they know what they're supposed to be doing, giving eye contact, moving around the class, and providing a lot of wait time for questions. I liked the section they had called Provide Flexible Learning Goals, which includes talking with students informally, greeting students, being aware of students' extracurriculars like sports or theater or clubs, and commenting on their achievements. I think I have done a good job of this, which falls into good classroom management. Since I have done since I have taken an interest in them, they will do the work that I want them to do. So creating good classroom relationships is important in the classroom and will create a stable classroom atmosphere. I also like to do really engaging activities, which makes the students actually work and holds them accountable. In The Highly Engaged Classroom by Robert Marzano, there's a section on game-like activities, which I really liked. I know we can't always play games, but these types of activities will keep the students engaged and on task. We do Kahoots and Quizlet Lives to review which they like. Our whole campaign was essentially a game with one winner at the end, like whoever was elected president of class was the winner. Next week we will do a mock congress to see if students can pass laws, which is kind of like a game. So they're like educational games, which I feel like are fun. So keeping students invested in learning, especially in this stage of their senior year, will help with classroom management. And classroom management is something that I felt like I need more help on, but after this semester I think I've been getting better with it. But it is a skill that I will only continue to perfect later on in my career. So I'm excited for next week. We will be discussing citizenship and naturalization in first block. Then we will take on the legislative branch in my second and third block. I will also be going on 2 field trips to Richmond this week. One of my school's field trips got canceled a few weeks ago due to the snow, so we have somewhat rescheduled it. A few of the activities were booked now, but we will still have fun, so I'm excited to go on 2 field trips and start citizenship and the legislative branch this week. So thanks for watching.